Good morning, everyone, or afternoon or evening, depending on where you're tuning in from today. My name is John Miller. I handle marketing and media for Lead to Goals. For those of you who have joined us before, welcome back. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'd like to give you a bit of information about our presenter. The presenter today is Scott DeLong. He's an entrepreneur, business owner, author, and educator. Scott has successfully built and exited 3 businesses. He's a lifelong learner, having earned a master's degree in leadership development at the age of 54, and then later completed his doctorate in leadership studies. Scott has a strong passion for the work he does with Lead to Goals and delivering the content he has developed. Quick note for the presentation today: if you have any questions at all, feel free to enter them in the chat window, or if there's a time that you just like to ask a question yourself, feel free to use the little raise hand icon, and we'll do our best to stop and answer the questions in real time.
Thank you, John. The first thing I want to do is mention the chat feature. John's monitoring that. I don't have the capacity to multitask like many other people do. So if you're going to put questions in there for us, that's fine. John will read them out. And if you just want to interrupt and start talking a little bit, please do so. I mean, this is supposed to be an interactive process, and I would really appreciate kind of feedback from everybody along the way. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a request. And it's not a mandatory request, but it's a request. You get to see me, and I would like to see you. So if you would be willing, please turn on your camera. And the reason that I do that, because it really helps me to see the level of engagement. And if I'm going in a direction that people aren't resonating with, I can switch directions just by watching the view, the looks on your faces and that sort of thing. So for those of you that are willing, and so far we have one person who's been willing, thank you very much. Milton, thank you, sir. And Cindy, thank you too. So please turn on your cameras if you're willing. And again, if you want to interrupt, put the raise hand icon up or blurt in. Either way, it's fine with me. This is about effective communications. And it can't be effective if it's just one way. If I'm just sitting here lecturing to folks, we're not going to get nearly as much out of this as we are as if you participate. And just a word on that, people are kind of leery to participate in a group with others that they don't know everybody in the room, and wondering, is this a dumb question? There are no dumb questions. So, you hear that and it's a cliche, but there really are no dumb questions. And if you're thinking about asking it, somebody else probably is as well. So please don't be afraid to speak up, challenge anything I have to say as well. John mentioned I'm a lifelong learner, and I am. I only know what I know, right? And if there's something that's outside my purview that you have information on, love to hear it, right? Even if it's in direct contrast to anything that I have to say. Is that fair? Okay, so we've got 4 or 5 people that turn their cameras on. I'm going to ask one more time. If you're willing to turn your camera on, it's going to make it a little easier for me to get this thing rolling. All right, so effective communications, kind of a boring title. Most of us think that we can communicate pretty well. The problem is we don't, right? I use a line a lot that says communication is what you hear and interpret, not what I say. It matters to the listener or the reader or someone who is, I'm trying to get my message across. Often, and before I started studying this stuff, I would go, I'd go into my boardroom and say, hey, everybody knows what I mean, right? And everyone nodded their head. A week later, when the projects came in, I had 6 different projects, completely different, right? It was their interpretation of what they thought I meant rather than finding out, is this really resonating, and are we on the same page here? So effective communications is all about a 2-way street or more, 1 to many it could be as well. All right, before we go too far, this is a shameless plug. My partner and I, we have a podcast that we put on every week, and it's free. And we don't ask anything of you other than to spend a half an hour listening to us. It's a lot of really good content, interesting dialogue. Sometimes we have guests, sometimes we don't. There's a QR code here. If you'd like to scan that, it'll take you right to that. And it's on all the major channels. We've even been doing YouTube for the video content. But as you can see, I'm probably not the best looking, view. So you can listen to it just as well as you can watch it. But if you're interested in free content, and there's a lot of it, like every week, Vince and I get into some great discussions, sometimes debate, sometimes we agree, but it's always fun, at least fun for us. So free content for you here, scan the code. It's called the CEO Podcast. It's conversations with entrepreneurs about opportunity. We talk about communication. We talk about trust. We talk about team building. We talk about organizational development. We talk about a lot of things in here. So depending on how we're feeling on the day. All right. So back to communications, dialogue. So what is dialogue? It's a discussion between two or more people or groups, right? It's communication, it's discourse. And communication is the process of disseminating that information and the exchange. Again, multifaceted exchange is communication. And then there's another subject when you call discourse. It's a mode of organizing knowledge and ideas experienced through communication. All that's kind of fancy words to say, hey, let's get on the same page. It's really what communication is all about. The benefits of engaging in dialogue: achieve mutual understanding before engaging in decision-making. That doesn't always happen. You've all been in boardrooms where somebody has just lectured and we've gone on and we're not on the same page. We're in different directions. And that's prior to decision-making. I want to hear from you before I make a decision. So they deal with emotion-laden, divisive content from time to time. We're going to talk a little bit about conflict in a while, but so give me a raise of hands if you like conflict. Anybody? I love it. I love it. Why? Because the way I define conflict, and we'll get to that in just a minute, but it's really strange for someone to say, hey, let's get into a conflict. All right, I'm going to define it for you. Conflict is just the difference of opinion. Can it accelerate beyond that? Absolutely. And can those difference of opinion turn into something positive? Even more so if we do it right. So we want to be able to manage diverse opinions on a topic or an issue. And in fact, we want those diverse opinions. We don't want just what Scott says. If we only do what I know, we're only going to be as good as I can be. And I believe this wholeheartedly. We are smarter than me. We need to get the dialogue going from everybody else in the room, or don't invite them into the room if they're not going to have anything of value to say, right? Okay. So we can also determine shared interests and establish common ground. That's, becoming friends, becoming colleagues, doing that. That's great. Develop cohesiveness within the community, and then create new ways of seeing and doing things. Not just the old way or not just Scott's way, but the way that's going to work best for us. And the best thing about dialogue, and this is where most of my work comes in, it increases trust between individuals. If we really engage in dialogue, and that is two-way communication, not just me lecturing, but you participating, we will end up trust. And if we listen properly, right, which is the most important portion of communication, is the ability to listen and understand somebody else, we will increase the trust between us. So let's talk about conflict. Most of us deal with this with a fight or flight scenario, right? And there's the fight, flight, or freeze. People talk about freeze as well, which is kind of a startle, but we get into fight or flight. It's inbred within us. We'll either battle for what we know is right, or we'll give in and avoid the fight, or avoid it completely, right? And then the third thing that we tend to do in a conflict is we tend to compromise. I almost always hate compromise. Compromise means nobody's winning. We're not getting anywhere positive with that. Sorry about that. My cat just jumped up on the desk. So he likes helping me a lot. So this is the fear of conflict that keeps us from engaging in this dialogue. And if we don't engage in dialogue, there's no way that we can create synergy. Synergy is the concept of 1 and 1 equals something more than 2. Your ideas and my ideas are going to create something better than than either of us would have come up with on our own. So the most important piece of this conflict is to reframe it, from my point of view, to reframe it as just a difference of opinion. It does not have to be a fight. It does not have to be a battle. It does not have to be a war. It has to be exchanged, get into dialogue on the difference of those opinions, and then you can get something positive out of it. I've developed something. If you've been to any of my previous webinars, you've heard this before, and that is a theory called the circle of trust. And the circle of trust is a way to build trust faster and deeper through communication. Most of us develop trust by this last piece, the deliver on the promise that's over here on this end over here. You know, you say you're going to do something and you do it over and over and over and over and over again. People start trusting you, right? They trust that you're willing to do that thing at least. But I think trust is more than that. More trust, that's a cognitive form of trust, meaning in my head, I know I can trust you to do that thing because you've done it before, right? And it takes a while, right? And most people will say, developing trust is going to take a while. This process allows us to develop trust faster and deeper. It's a communication process, but it starts with something called respect. Anyone ever grow up? Here's where I grew up with respect. My father taught me respect is earned, it's not given. Anyone hear that before? All right. People have to earn the respect. I'm not talking about that kind of respect. I'm talking about a different level of respect, and that's respect for human dignity. Respect for you as a person, have something of value, right? We all have some, even my enemies, I can have a level of respect for my enemies for their humanity, for the thing that they're trying to do, even if that's just raise good kids or be a good human or whatever, right? Just have that level of respect. Start there and you've gone a long way. The next step in this process is to listen to understand, as opposed, and that's a Stephen Covey concept from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You've probably heard that before, right? The listen to understand is opposed, just polar opposite of what most of us do. We listen to reply. We listen to debate. Sometimes we listen to agree, right? And give our reply. And this listening to understand does more than just take time to nod your head in agreement and pay attention to the person, all the active listening things that you've heard about. But it is the best way for me to listen to understand is to ask questions about the thing that you're talking about. Qualifying questions, clarifying questions. When you're talking about something, I'm going to be listening in a way where I am watching. It's called whole body listening. I'm going to be watching your body language. I'm going to be watching your face. And when you're telling me a story of something, there's going to be something in there that I'm going to key in on, right? And it's the emotional piece, your eyes, your hand movements, something's going to tell me that this was important to this person. I'm going to ask a question about that thing. In the Toyota way, the Toyota manufacturing company back in the 50s, I think, late 40s and 50s, came up with something called the Toyota way, and they said the 5 whys. Anyone heard that before, the 5 whys? 5 whys are to ask, what I tell you the first time is probably not the thing that's really important, but you go down 5, ask 5 different questions. And they use why because it is the most important question you can find out. The problem with the word why is it sounds accusatory. It sounds like, why are you so stupid? I mean, that's how it sounds when you ask the question why. So what I suggest is ask why without using the word why. And you do that by asking some open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are difficult for people to ask. We're usually asking questions about yes or no. Hey, did you like lunch today? Yes. You know, yes and no, closed-ended questions are conversation killers. It is the end of the conversation. That is the answer. An open-ended question is one that'll get a story, that'll elicit a story. And if you can't think about how to do that, one of my favorite ways is to use an acronym called TED. If you're going to write anything down, write this down. TED. Tell, explain, describe. Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. I don't see it that way. Can you describe a situation where that might work? help me understand, if you could explain how, right? So using those words elicits a story. And that's where people get to the heart of the matters when they're telling a story. So if that's all you get out of this hour that we're going to spend together, TED is it. Get questions to people that are open-ended so that they can tell a story. Now watch them while they're telling you the story and look for those cues. Look for those emotional cues and ask a question about the thing that got their emotions working. Go a little deeper and a little deeper. You get down to the fifth why, you probably get to the root cause. You might get it in 3, you might get it in 6, but 5 whys tends to work, right? So TED works. All right. Share from experience. Sharing from experience is diametrically opposed to telling you what to do. Most of us, a great majority of humans will give advice. I tend not to give advice. Nobody wants my advice. You know, if we're teaching something, that's one thing. But if you're saying, hey, what do you think I should do about such and such? They really don't want to know what I think. In fact, it's pretty arrogant of me to assume that I know what they should do. I don't have their experience. I don't have their background. I don't have their whatever, right? I don't have the consequences that are going to happen as well. So for me to tell you what to do, what you should do, is a fairly arrogant thing. Now, it's okay for me to say, wow, I had a similar situation. Here's what happened to me, and here's how that felt. That's sharing from experience. That goes deep, right? I'm helping, but I'm not telling. So it's more of a process of saying, this is similar to something I've seen before. And I don't know what you should do. In fact, I've even taken the word should out of my vocabulary almost completely. I'm not perfect at it yet, because I still do it, especially at home, right? Oh, honey, you should such and such. Even there, it's not the best place to use the word should, or especially there, it's not the best place to use should, right? But if you could take the word should out of your vocabulary, unless you're talking about yourself, here's what I should do. I know what I should do. You know what you should do. I don't know what you should do. I know what I might do in that situation. And if it's helpful, great. But to tell you what you should do is a pretty arrogant thing. And then the last piece of this is the deliver on the promise. And that's just doing what you say you're going to do. It's the fastest way to break trust, but it's the slowest way to build trust. I can commit to you that if you walk through, even with a stranger, and there's an intent and a willingness, right? If you walk through this cycle 3 times, you will start developing a different level of respect, greater trust, and building relationship. 3 interactions. Which as we've built trust with somebody in 3 interactions, this will do it. This process works. Okay, next. All right. This might be noteworthy too. Communication hierarchy. Basically, what the communication hierarchy talks about is going from the least effective to most effective methods of communication. I think we all know that a face-to-face communication is the most effective way to do it. We're doing Zoom because we have to. But if we were in the same room, we'd get a deeper level of something than we would just on this Zoom. I'd be able to see your whole body. I'd be able to read the whole thing. You'd be able to do the same. You'd be able to look into my eyes and see if I'm telling you crap or if it's real, right? I mean, face-to-face is the best form of communication. Below that's a video call. Below that's a phone call. Below that is the most overused method of communication in the business world today, emails. Look how far down this list that email is, yet it's our go-to method of communication in the business world, and sometimes in the personal world, right? Sending an email to somebody, and then we use text in the personal world more often, or instant message in the business, and I think that's below email only because of the limitations that it has, right? What the communication hierarchy says is that the greater the chance of disagreement, difference of opinion, conflict, however you want to look at it, the higher up the ladder you need to go. when possible. But we can't do face-to-face all the time anymore. I get that. But the conflict, difference of opinion, challenges work better in person than they do on emails. Anyone ever get into an email debate? Somebody says something, then the next person raises the gates, and then we end up hating each other. It's just a horrible way of doing things. Now, I'm not opposed to email, but I think there's a better way of using email than we do. I think email is great for memorializing a conversation. You and I can have a conversation, and we have different interpretations of the outcomes, right? It happens all the time. Or our memories fade, and I thought she said this, and maybe he said that, kind of thing happens. But I like to use emails to memorialize a conversation. So we have something going on at work, and I pick up the phone and I say, hey, I'm not sure blue's the right color. Can we see what green looks like? In an email, that would be horrible. It would turn out bad. But in a phone call, it's just a conversation. And then we discuss the thing about the blue versus the green, and we come up with a decision that's going to work for best of us. I'm going to send you an email on what we decided. Hey, thanks for the call today. Here's what we agreed on, this, and this. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what I'm going to do, right? That kind of thing, and send it. And memorialize the conversation. And it gives the other person a chance to read it and say, that's not quite what I said. Then they pick up the phone and come back, and then we work it out, right? But memorializing the conversation is a great use for email. All right. Can anybody guess a lower form of communication than the least effective one here, which I'm saying is text or IM? Any guesses out there? Don't be shy. How about that? Assuming I know what you're going to say. That is the lowest form of communication. People are going to say no communication. No, assuming is worse. I may get it right. I may guess right when I assume what you're going to do. Probably not. Again, I don't have your background, your experience, your shared events. I don't have the risks that you might have with such. For me to assume is the lowest form of communication you can have.
Scott, is that the same thing as making up your own story?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll get into that in a little bit. There's a whole plan here. In fact, I'm going to recommend a couple books to you, and that's part of telling the story, right? Is it true? Or is it the story that I've laid on the truth? Or a different view of the truth, right? Because we can have two completely different views of truth. And you ever see the old cartoon that had like a 6 on one side, two people standing on each other's, right? And from one side it looks like a 6, and the other side it looks like the 9.
Yeah.
Just because I'm right doesn't mean you're wrong. Okay. So told you about a book. If you want to, in fact, I teach a class on this book. I love it. It's an easy read. It's gosh, they've sold probably 5 million copies now. And it is really a good book. It's called Crucial Conversations. And a crucial conversation is one where opinions vary, emotions are strong, and the stakes are high. Makes sense, right? That's when we go into fight or flight mode usually. What I'm suggesting is that there's a better way. And that's the dialogue concept. Here's one of the things that the book talks about, and that's to start with the heart. What is it that I want? What do I want for you? What do I want for the relationship? And actually, the older I get, the more I realize that it's that third question is the most important one for me. What do I want for the relationship? If it's transactional, right? If it's, I'm going to 7-Eleven and going to buy a Slurpee. I'm not going to develop a relationship. I just want to get what I want, right? But that's not a crucial conversation at all. But what do I want to get from the relationship ends up being more important question to me almost always. I mean, there may be some times where what I want is what I need and I have to get that thing. But I'm talking about, generally speaking, my wants and your wants can coexist and we can get something better. And we're going to have a relationship that's going to help us in the future as well. So when you go through those three questions, the fourth question you ask yourself is the next thing I'm going to say or the next thing I'm going to do going to get me what I want? If so, do it. And if not, rethink it. It was a really simple concept. This exploring others' path that's part of the listening to understand, trying to understand where you're coming from and what you need and why is this important to you kind of questions. That exploring others' path is the fastest way to turn a conflict into synergy. And here's why. If I'm just pounding my fist and telling you what I want, and you're pounding your fist and telling me what you want, all we're doing is pushing each other away. So if I see you in that mode where you're pounding your fist and you're telling me what you want, the best way for me to deflect that is to play judo, to do judo with you, is to let your actions trip you up, right? So how do I do that? I show interest in your side. I go to the 5 whys and I ask the TED questions about what's your interest. The first thing that I will see, first you'll start pounding your fist and then you'll start saying, well, and you still have a little anger on your face. By the third question, all of a sudden the shoulders drop. The person relaxes a little more. Why? Because I'm showing interest in them and their idea. Now, that doesn't mean I have to agree with their idea. But right now is not the time to disagree with it. Disagree will turn us into a debate instead of dialogue. And we'll just keep upping the ante. We'll just keep raising the stakes of the game. But if I show interest in your thing, you will probably, not 100% guarantee, will probably show me the same grace and give me my turn later. Now, this works on about 95% of the population. Doesn't work on everyone, so I can't guarantee it's 100%. So the 5% that it doesn't work on are narcissists and sociopaths. And the studies show that 4 to 5% of the people in the world fit into that, antisocial personality disorder. So it's going to work with everybody once they begin to trust you a little bit. And how are they going to trust you? Showing interest in them, right? Going through that circle of trust process. This will work so that we can get to what we want, what's best for us. Talked a little bit about this at the beginning, is why I really like face-to-face, even more so than Zoom, and why I've asked people to turn their cameras on. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people have turned their cameras on. The rest of you, give me a shout here. Turn your camera on. Let me see what you look like. Let me see how we're doing here. Thanks. I appreciate that. So this is an old study back in the 60s, I believe, that says 93% of all communication is nonverbal. It's not quite true. It's not quite true. I mean, the words that I say do matter, right? But this talks about nonverbal communication in the form of facial expressions and body language and the tone of voice, and the pace of my voice matters as well. When I'm excited and animated, I'm going to be talking faster. When I'm depressed, I'm going to be probably talking a little bit slower and lower, right? So all those things matter and add context to the conversation. Crucial Conversations talks about the silence and violence, and that's just fight or flight. Silence is masking, avoiding, withdrawing, right? Which is the flight. And then the violence is controlling, labeling, attacking, which is the fight. I mean, that's how most people attack a conflict, fight or flight scenario, right? And they call it silence and violence. Fight or flight works for me. So here's the really important part of this for the other people, and that's to make it safe. There are going to be times when my emotions get the best of me or your emotions get the best of you, and it's just not working, right? We're human, and it's just not working. So the first step is the first thing to do is, when that happens, unless you've got all the power in the world and you want to dominate someone and ruin a relationship, which might be the case, right? When that happens, It asks you to step out. Hey, I need a few minutes. Can we take a breath here? Can we take a break? Very few questions have to be answered in the moment. If a fire is going on, maybe then, right? But there's very few emergencies that have to be answered in the moment. Take a breath. Count, do what your mom told you. Count to 10. Do some meditation. Do something to get yourself under control. And while you are doing that, learning to manage those emotions, the other person is probably going to as well. Can I take a few minutes? Hardly ever will they say, no, we're going to handle this right now. And if they do, come back with what I call a broken record and say, no, I really need a few minutes. You know what? I need to go to the restroom. I'll do that, right? No one's going to tell you you can't do that. So find a way to step out. But if you don't step back in, you're in flight mode. Stepping back into the conversation, it's crucial because it matters. Remember, it's one of the three. It matters. It's important. We need to do this. But I don't want to do it when I'm angry or upset. If I've done something, apologize. If I've done something to harm you or even hurt you, even if it wasn't my intention to do so, apologize. What's that cost you? A sincere apology. Oh, and it's not a, oh, I'm sorry you're so upset. It's, I'm sorry that I upset you. Take responsibility for the action in the apology. That will go a long way. How many times do you like it when someone says, oh, I'm sorry you're upset? That's putting all the blame on you. It doesn't do anything to form this relationship that I'm talking about. I'm going to take responsibility for being the person that upset you. Now, I don't believe that I have the ability to upset you. You choose whether or not you get upset, but I want to take responsibility for it anyway. Why? Because what I want for the relationship is more important than what I want. Almost always. Question 3 is more important than question 1. They have a technique in the book called contrasting. Hey, I don't want to upset you. What I do want to do is whatever that you're going to say, right? So contrasting what you don't want and you do want. I don't want to end up with a bad relationship. What I do want is for us to resolve this conflict and maintain our relationships. Things like that. That's what contrasting looks like. Creating mutual purpose. There are situations where we look like we might be at odds on whatever the conflict is. I can almost guarantee that if you go down deep enough in the 5 whys, you are going to find something that we can agree on. Congress does this a lot. The ambassadors, the people, they do it a lot. They look for agreement first, even if it's something minor, even if it's, hey, we both use blue pens to write our names or whatever it is. Find something that we can agree on and start building from there. And then this last piece on respect, which is, again, the first part of the circle of trust, is to show them respect. They are trying to do what they need to do for their reasons. You may or may not understand them, but they're trying to do their thing for the good of themselves or their organization or their family or whatever it's going to be. Most people are not out to harm you. That's not what their intent is. So let's go find out what their intent is. And we can do that by showing them a little respect. And they'll tell us if we show them the respect. You know, I hear a lot of times, well, you know, you can't just go and ask them what they want. Well, yeah, you kind of can. If they believe that you truly care, right, and you're looking for a mutual solution, you will get their information from them. Okay, here we go. There's your question. And it's, I'm sorry, Renee, right? Master my stories. The stories that we tell ourselves. I'm a victim, I'm a villain, or I'm helpless. Those are the stories that we lay on to facts, right? It's somebody else's fault. Poor me, right? That's how we look at these kind of stories. Try to eliminate these stories from your dialogue. What you want to find out is, and I got a really good friend, I don't think he's on here. I'm looking for Troy. He's not on here, but he has a great line that I like. Anytime he comes up to this, something that doesn't sound right, first thing he asks himself, is it true? I'm going to change that to, can it be true? right? It might kind of expands that a little bit, because from their point of view, it may be 100% true. And from my point of view, I don't quite see it, right? So can it be true? And from what position might that be true? And then don't lay your stories, your victimhood stories on top of these things. It's not going to help. It hardly ever, when you're playing the victim, is someone just going to give in to you. It just doesn't work like that, right? They look at you, they look down on you, really, when you start playing these clever story games. So you ask yourself, you're in silence and violence, you get in touch with your own feelings. This has to do with emotional intelligence, which is another course that we teach. And then you analyze your story. What's the story I'm telling myself to make me feel this way? And then get back to facts. So we talk a lot about mindfulness in the emotional intelligence, and to clearing your mind, being in the present, and seeing if it's true, right? Get yourself in a calm scenario so that you can ask the question if it's true. Then we explore other paths, and we talked a little bit about that. Try to get to their why, the TED. Agree with them where you can agree, and you're going to disagree in some situations. But if you've listened to them, then they give you the opportunity to listen to you. Maybe we can find some common ground in there somewhere. And I'm saying in most cases we probably can. And then to move to action. So dialogue is not decision making. Just because we have a great conversation doesn't mean we've decided anything, right? We actually have to move to action and kind of solidify these things. One of the things that I like to talk to people about in a group setting is, before we get down to decision making, let's decide how we're going to decide. And have you ever been in a conference room before? Your boss calls you together because you think he or she wants your opinion on a subject, but he or she's already got their mind made up. Ever had that happen to you before? Yeah, how fun is that? No, I don't want to go to that meeting anymore. If you're not going to listen to what I have to say, why should I bother even being there, right? Or why should he even bother bringing me in? So deciding how we're going to decide, when I get into a meeting, the first thing that I want to do is say, hey, we got a couple of decisions we're going to make, and command. This one's going to be by command. I have to do this. The weight of the world's on my shoulders. I've got to make a decision. That's a command decision. I really don't need any input for that. I'm just going to make a decision, right? Consult. Hey, I want to hear your opinions. I need to hear all of this stuff because we are smarter than me. But I still need to make the decision because, again, the weight of the world is going to be on my shoulders. So that's a consult. Then there's a vote. Congress does this. It's a horrible way of making a decision. 51-49 is not a really great decision, right? We're not going to have the best for us if we're in a 51-49 scenario, right? And I mean, if you want to decide where we're going to go to lunch, maybe we can vote on that, but not much more than that, right? Not much. But consensus, and this is where I really like to get to. The only reason I need all of you in my meeting is because I need your input. And then I'm going to need your support to help put this thing together, to move forward with it. The best way to get that is to go through consensus, to get a consensus. Now, consensus doesn't mean we all have to agree. All it means is we all have to support the decision. We can all support the decision if we've been open and we hear what everyone had to say, analyze it, show genuine care for your point of view, and then we as a group decide what's best for us. So here's why we don't do consensus, though. It takes too long, right? It takes a long time to hear everybody's side. It's worth it in most situations. We don't want to get to consensus. Again, go to the burning building, right? We want a command and control leader at that point. Hey, you dial 911, you help this person here, you administer CPR. Great. We don't want to get to consensus. Let's get a meeting and decide who's going to, give CPR. No. So there are times for command decisions, right? But if I need help from my team, let's say you're my team, the best way for me to get that help is to get your commitment, not just your compliance. If I have enough power, I can get compliance. If I have enough time to listen and interact with you, I can get your commitment. Commitment's much better than compliance. In the workforce, and at home. This stuff works both places. At the end of all my meetings, here's the other thing I'm going to do is here's what we need from who, by when. When I was growing up and I was a young manager, I hated giving deadlines. I hated it because I have some people are going to say aggressive. I call it assertive because I like me better than that, but an aggressive personality, right? And I thought if I gave people deadlines, they would think that he's just being a jerk, right? Well, come to find out, and what I learned growing through the years is that giving people deadlines is actually doing them a favor. One, we work better on deadlines. I remember go back to school. When there was you had a paper due Monday morning. When'd you get it done? Sunday night. So we had a deadline. If there wasn't a deadline, it might not have got done. So that's one reason. But the other reason is it helps set the expectations. And if I give you a deadline that's unreasonable, I need to be willing to listen to what is reasonable. Hey, can I have this by Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning? And you say, well, yeah, but you gave me 7 other projects already, and they're all due Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Can I get to do this one at 2 o'clock? I need to be reasonable with that deadline as well. I need to hear the feedback to see what's reasonable and what's rational, right? So I can't just command the deadlines, but I can suggest. And if there's a firm deadline, I have to give it and we have to meet it. And if you say, I got too much work to do, I can't meet that deadline. Well, let's take some of your other things off the plate then, because this is the one that needs to be done by 10 o'clock Friday morning. And we can have that negotiation. But that's, again, it's dialogue. It's two-way communication. It's me telling you what I need and you telling me what your limitations are. Both are important because they're both real. Okay. The other thing is that we assign people, a person, a thing to do. One of the things that I've seen happen all the time in business meetings is the boss is going to sit up there and say something like, well, okay, well, what we need to do is, well, we don't do anything. A human being does that thing. So I've got to say, Renee, I need you to have this. I need this done by Renee, or Tina, we need this from you. There's no we. We are a team. We are going to collaborate. We're going to work, but individuals have to do things. So here's what we need from who, by when. You leave a meeting like that, there's clarity. Give people a chance to challenge it, say, hey, listen, that's not going to work for me. Great. But there's clarity in that. All right, another book. If you like reading, here's another book that I highly recommend. It's called Humble Inquiry. The best part of this is the subtitle of the book. It is the gentle art of asking and not telling. How do I get your commitment instead of compliance? I ask. How do I get compliance? I tell. Which one do you like better? All right, let's ask. Let's talk. Let's ask questions of people and get their answers rather than sit up here and command and control and tell folks to do things. So this is the first book I ever read that I just read from start to finish, like in 3 hours. It was that engaging to me. It was like, oh my gosh, this guy gets it. Edgar Schein's an organizational development guy. He's probably 85 years old now, but brilliant. And this is a very simple book to read as well, not written in an academic style at all. So if you like reading, pick this up. I think it's worth the read. The whole part about this is in you could tell from the third question, remember, building relationships, what do I want for a relationship? That's the important part of business. Business is all relationships. Unless it's transactional, again, the Slurpee and the 7-Eleven person, right? Okay, that happens. But most business is ongoing and it's all about building relationships. Building trust is the key to building relationships. And I'm going to tell you a word that most people will not use in the business world, and that's vulnerability. The thing that I've found in my life, and it wasn't always like this, trust me. I've got this kind of personality. and get things done kind of personality. But the thing that I found in my life, the most attractive quality that I can have is vulnerability. It draws people to you. Didn't make me any better looking. I mean, that didn't work, but it draws people to you, being vulnerable. Can you just be vulnerable out the chute? No, you got to build trust too, because being vulnerable is giving up a risk. There's a risk in being vulnerable with others, and you want to mitigate the risk, certainly. But again, if you go through that circle of trust process first, then you can see where you are with folks. Being vulnerable will just draw them closer and closer and closer to you. What does it have to do with communication? Well, it's certainly a lot easier to get through conflict with someone that likes me than someone that doesn't, right? So I use that word a lot, vulnerability, because it's the one that really impacted me. But I think this part of the circle of trust that we call the cycle, not the cycle, but this is the underlying values within that. I relate respect to humility, being humble enough to respect others. Listen to understand is empathy, emphatic listening, showing some empathy for somebody. Empathy is not feeling sorry for them. That's sympathy. Empathy is working to understand them, where they're coming from, listening to understand, right? Vulnerability comes in the shared from experience. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. It might help, might not, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. And then the dependability piece is delivering on a promise. So this is the circle of trust, a little deeper, with 3 words that you rarely ever hear in business: humility, empathy, and vulnerability. But they're powerful. You want to be a leader? Work on those 3 words. So where are these humble inquiry appropriate and effective? Oh, anywhere you want a relationship, Mike. Relationship with power differentials, parent-child or boss-subordinate? Absolutely. Relationships that shouldn't have a power imbalance, sometimes they do, spouse or significant other. Interdepartmental teams. Ever work with teams in another, like, let's find out about them as well. The credit department thinks different than the sales department. Let's find out what's important to them. Let's find out from their point of view why the thing that I'm proposing doesn't make sense for them, right? Relationships without a power imbalance, your friends and your peers. This humble inquiry works everywhere, except that 5%, the antisocial personality disorders, doesn't necessarily work there. Just way to phrase questions here. Why did that make you angry? Like, blaming you. It's your fault for being angry. Why did that do that? Right? Not a great question. How did it make you feel? Then explore what they say about anger. Well, what do you think? What do you think caused that? Not it's your fault, right? It's just a subtle difference in the way that we ask questions and the kind of communication that we're going to end up getting back from folks. Anyway, TED is important. Tell, explain, describe 5 times. You're going to get there. You'll get there. Where I can go long and long on this. This is one of my favorite courses to teach. So I'm going to go past. This is an example of when I screwed up. I'm not going to show you that, but I screw up on it as well. And it was someone that I cared about. But we can get into that at some point. But why bother? Right? That's the question. It's all about developing relationships. This is the 3 cycles that I told you about earlier. You go through, if you have an intention, I want to form a relationship. Go through the cycle the first time, you're going to gain some authenticity. People are going to see it, right? Go through it the second time, you're going to gain some more respect for them. Go through it the third time, is trust. Once you have that trust, you can have a relationship. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your relationships. The quality of your business is no different. Harvey McKay said that. I love that line. Okay, at the beginning, when you signed up for this, we promised you that we give you a conflict resolution tool. Really simple tool. In fact, everything that I do is simple. It's not always easy, but it's very simple. So here's a QR code that can get you that freebie that we promised. It's just a way to reframe and rethink about some conflict. And actually, before we go into any conflict, I really think preparation's required. Preparation mentally, meaning get myself in the right frame of mind. We go into mindfulness and getting peace and present on that, but then also preparing for what you have the expectations of the conflict. And this tool kind of helps you do that. So if you want to scan the code, you'll get your free copy of that. And give just another second and we'll move on to the end, because I'm hoping that there's going to be some questions before we go. But I also want to tell you about something that's coming up. Live online workshop, Friday, January 13th. So it's a month from today that we're going to be doing this. It's really 3.5 hours of what we just did, but we go into depth, right? So here's where you can learn and practice and share with other people within the group on this workshop. And we got a special offer for the folks that are here today. It's only for those of you that are here. So you're going to get 3.5 hours of live instruction. We normally charge $3.99 for that. Next, you'll get a trust inventory, which is this is a survey tool that we do with groups and show them the level of trust within their organization or within their group. It's a really cool, simple tool, and then a decent analysis on top of that. You'll also get the full course workbook, meaning this course that I teach is 11 weeks long. It's 90 minutes a week for 11 weeks, right? And I teach that to organizations. We try to compact that into a 3.5 hour session, which you can't get it all, but you'll get the full workbook so that you can work on your own with the instruction that goes along with it. So you'd get that as well. And then one more. So we normally charge $3.99 just for that live presentation. I'm also going to give 1 hour, 50 minutes coaching session for each person in attendance. We'll set that up after the fact. We'll go through the course first, and then we can work on your individual story. So my coaching's usually pretty expensive. This gets thrown in because you came to this thing today. So it's over $1,800 worth of value for this workshop. And for those of you here, we're going to give it to you for $199. It's only going to keep this offer open until Friday. So you got 2 days to talk to the boss, get the payment, whatever, in if you want the special price because you were here. $199. I mean, just the cost of the one-on-one consultation is almost 3 times that. So really, if this is something that's important to you, sign up for this course. I mean, this is a really cool deal. So we've got a QR code for this, I think, here too as well. So if you're interested, take the QR code, and there's a link here that you can go to as well. So again, it's January 13th and 3.5 hours. It's a Friday, so hopefully it's a lighter day for more people. But it really is fun. And we use a technique in this that we call a reverse classroom, where you become the star. It's your stories that help impact the rest of the group that's there. It's really it's a fun 3.5 hours. So if you want to do that, go ahead and do that. If I'm going too fast, scott@lead2goals.com, and I'll send you a link for whatever you want as well. And then I wanted to let you know the next one, we're going to skip January's webinar because getting people to sign up during the holidays isn't easy, but we're going to do another one of these, which is on employee development, investing in your people, in February. So this is the free event, 1 hour, just like this one was. So that will be on LinkedIn, just like you found this one. And I really appreciate you participating today. So now we're open for questions, and I will stick on as long as anyone wants to stick on today. We're down to 6 minutes left in the hour that we said we'd commit to. So, oops, sorry, I closed it. We're at the thank you time, but I see there's some chats. I can't read them, but John, are there any questions that anybody had? Or is anyone that's live right now want to ask their question before they have to fall off? Happy to answer anything.
I do have one question. So someone was asking about there's conflict around them all the time. The problem is that they're having conflict with their boss.
Yeah.
And how can the person bring up the issues? There's a fear of being fired.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Power differentiates, right? And I think one of the best ways of doing that, and if you have the old school command and control kind of boss, it's a little harder. I get that, but it's still possible to break them down a little bit. And I think the humble inquiry approach is the way to go with that. Can you help me understand how that's going to work with this scenario, right? So I like asking questions that are open-ended to get them to tell a story, but I don't like asking questions that are statements in the form of a question. Don't you think blue would be better? I mean, it's really, there's a question mark at the end of it, but it's really a statement, right? And the boss isn't going to like that, especially that command and control boss isn't going to like that. But if you ask one of those humble inquiry type questions and then follow it up with another question and then another question, you'll get a chance to explore what it is that you're looking for at some point. But again, it doesn't always work. So sometimes these command and control bosses are narcissists, and it's not going to work with them. I'm sorry. What I'm going to suggest is find a new boss, right? So sometimes that's the answer. But with most people, if we take this dialogue approach, you'll be able to break down some of those barriers and enter into this conversation with that person. Got a couple hands up. Alistar, is that how you say it?
Yeah, that's all right. Thanks. Yeah, so I'm in diversity and inclusion consulting, focusing primarily on race.
Okay.
And I'm curious, like, how applicable are these tools to resolve like racial conflict in the workplace? Because it's multi-layered.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So I'm just curious, would there be a resource you could recommend? I mean, like the humble inquiry example as a book.
Yeah, it really is. I think it's the only way to solve those, especially if we have people that are unaware, right? I mean, there's some people that are just plain racist. I get that. Right? I'm going to put those in that narcissist group that they're just racist and you're not going to get through to them. But there's a lot of people in the world that are just not aware of how the other people are seeing the world, right? The experience.
Exactly. So I like how you said about seeing the world, because I can take an example of like the Russia-Ukraine situation, right? Where people might come into that conversation from totally different perspectives. And then it's a water cooler debate. Next thing, it's affecting the workplace dynamic.
So I'm not afraid to talk politics or religion or anything. You know, they say when you go to Thanksgiving dinner, you don't talk politics, religion, and you just keep it in news, weather, and sports. No, not me. I want, and here's how I keep that from turning into a hostile situation, is that I really spend time trying to understand your point of view rather than force mine on them.
Okay.
There's a lot of reasons. One, it relaxes the other person when I'm trying to understand them. But two, it makes me smarter. I have more information than I had before. I didn't see it like that. You're a black man, I'm a white guy. We're not going to see things from the same historical perspective. But I'm going to get smarter by trying to understand where you're coming from and what you've seen in your life. And if you go into a conversation with that, more likely than not, you're going to have a reciprocal relationship and a willing partner that is going to be curious. So you got to be willing and you got to be curious. That's what I think.
Great. Thanks.
Great. Pa, I don't know how to say your name. Pa. Okay.
Yeah. How you all doing?
Great.
Yeah, that's amazing. I really love this. It was so nice. And I've learned a lot from this. And just a quick question. Do you mind sharing the deck that you were showing?
To send you the deck?
Yeah, if it's possible.
We have not done that before, because the work that I do is kind of proprietary. But if you want to take my email down and ask me some specific things, but to take the deck, I'm probably not going to do that.
Okay.
But I will share as much. None of this stuff is confidential, but it's
Okay.
the way I package things kind of proprietary. So I'd certainly be willing to help answer any questions that you might have.
No
We'll
problem.
also release the recording.
Oh yeah, the recording. We're going to. Good, thank you, John. This is going to be recorded, and you'll get a copy of that so you can watch it again and again and again. The other thing is, when we do the workshop, you will actually get a workbook, which has all this in it. So if you participate in the workshop, then you'll have exactly everything that you were looking for.
Yeah, nice. Because us we're currently a startup company in the West Africa, the Gambia and Senegal. So basically, our business model is SaaS sales and marketing ops consultant company. Okay. So basically, we're just crawling from the ground right now. We have like 10 team members, and sometimes it's really hard for the communication between the team members. Sure. Like we want to try and develop that more, because like we want to, and we are doing women empowerment too in Africa too, as at the same time, both in Senegal and the Gambia. So we want to try and develop the SaaS ecosystem in Africa here and help the women too, and show them like they can do whatever it takes, and they have the right to say, and they have the voice anywhere in the world. And because, like how the world is moving nowadays, like a lot of people are not having good jobs or not having like good roles at their workplace because of maybe communication skills or the way to move about with to be proactive, because like when you wake up in the day, like knowing that you've been employed to do your salesperson or your AE, you should not be like leaning there waiting for people to tell you exactly what to do, because you know exactly what you've been paid for and what you're employed for.
Hey, we are at the end of time right now, so I don't want to discount what you're saying, because I think it's important. Yeah. But John will be sending out a link to this. Share it with all your team. It's fine. Share the link so that they can take a look. There is a better way. I'm just saying there's a better way.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Renee, you were like nodding your head a lot, like I was saying something good. What did you hear? What did you like?
Well, I am a communication consultant, so I love a lot of what you've said, and it would be great for you to come on my podcast as well. But truly, what you're saying is just so true.
Well, thank you.
It's all about listening and stuff. So I don't want to go into who I am, and I just want for you to know that I will probably be joining your next webinar, because we cannot get enough. And reminders is always great.
Great, thank you.
So thank you.
Send me an email. I'd love to participate in your podcast.
Sounds great. I will do that.
I've actually got a book coming out in January that I would love to put on a podcast and say, hey, buy my book, because that'd be fun.
Let's do it soon. Okay, I'll send that. I saw your email here, so thank you.
Wonderful. And Allison, you turned your camera on. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Not everyone's willing to do that. I don't get it. Like maybe because their bed's not made, and I don't know. But any thoughts, ideas, questions that you might have had?
Nothing specific. I just want to say that I enjoyed it and it was very informative. I mean, there's always differences of opinions everywhere you go in life, and there's no avoiding it. Like it's not something that you can bury your head in the sand and avoid. So the more tools that you have, whether it's with my 6-year-old or, my coworkers or my in-laws, like it doesn't matter, or people that you bump into on the street, like the more tools you have, the stronger you will be in life. And that's why I enjoyed all of this. So thank you.
Oh, great. Yeah, absolutely. I tell people all the time, the work that we do is for business. I mean, this is the business, and we're doing it with our corporate clients, but it works at home too. I've had so many people in the class say, well, yeah, at work I'm like this, but at home I'm like this. And I look at them and I say, well, which one of those two people do you like better? Be that one at both places. And if it's effective here, it's going to be effective. These are just people. Even if they have different power and different, needs, right? They're just people. So be your best self in all these places. Okay. thank you all. I appreciate you sticking with us. We went a little over time. This is one of my favorite subjects, so I appreciate it. Again, Scott@leadtogoals.com. You want to send me an email? I'm happy to answer questions. I'd love to see you at the workshop, and thank you for participating.